Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the story behind the story. I'm your host, Dr. Ray Truott, celebrating 25 years now of radio broadcast excellence. We came a long way, baby, from the days of live radio at KSUB Radio Southern Utah and the simulcast that we picked up throughout all of the Southwest. It's amazing how truth seems to find listening ears throughout all the country. Welcome to the show tonight. This is again the I was just going to say how many broadcasts, but we really can't be definitive and say that. But it is what it is, folks. We're just so happy to be here at Revolution Radio, where the truth never sleeps. And again, freedomslips.com, as I said before. If you don't have freedom on your lips, then freedom slips. Isn't that kind of the way it is? Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to those listeners in across the world. We simulcast. Thank goodness we can do this with the Goldwater Network. Welcome. I believe we have our connection with the Goldwater. Major Burdock is with us. Major, are you with us tonight?
Yeah, great, Phil. I'm sorry, Phil. True. It's been we're here. It's a little rainy, but nonetheless beautiful. Another beautiful day here in the Philippines.
Well, thank you. I don't know if Philip is joining us now. I haven't checked. I've been rushing like crazy. I wanted to get a special guest tonight. He's reluctant to come on the show. I've asked him. I've talked with him. He's been a great source of information for the last, 6 years now. Longer than that, actually. The attorney's name is Paul Cassell. He's here in Salt Lake City. He represents a number of Jane Does who have brought suit not only against Jeffrey Epstein, but against the Justice Department itself. And this is an amazing story. I would love to have him tell his story first person, but he's going to be careful not to compromise the case. I can speak and tell the story for him. This is an ongoing, huge juggernaut of conspiracy here. I mean, I've said this from the beginning, since we started doing radio in 1995. We started doing, actually, 1994, 25 years ago. One of the things that we really focused on was this, what I feel is the Achilles heel of what is now known as the deep state, but I call it the Illuminati, whatever you want to call it. It's sex trafficking for money, and it's a huge international profit center. It's actually as profitable, if not more so, depending on the statistics you look at. It's actually more profitable than the drug trade, or as profitable, I should say. We're talking multi-billions of dollars. And again, it's horrendously heinous in its scope and what it does to the victims. The United States of America has roughly, according to FBI compilation figures, 300,000 victims a year. It boggles the mind how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of young girls and young boys. Some is, for heaven's sakes, as young as 2 years, 18 months to 2 years to 3 years of age. It's absolutely a sick world, no doubt about it. And yes, there are arrest maids. Yes, there are kingpins that seem to be above the law, but it seems like finally, at long last, truth seems to be winning out. I can't tell you how many radio shows I've done over the years, Major, with Ted Gunderson, John DeCamp, the incredible story that as it formed itself and then it was into book form, the Franklin cover-up. I was interviewing John DeCamp and Ted Gunderson before they even made it into the book, the Franklin cover-up. It was an ongoing saga and with Utah connections, believe me. Utah seems to be an epicenter of this, whether it's because of its proximity to the crossroads of the rest, or whether it's largely because of the hidden secrets of the prevailing religion here. And I'm not sure exactly why, but it is a crossroads for human sex trafficking. Make no mistake about it. I remember well fleshing this out with Ted Gunderson. He was a guest on this show many, many times. He just retired as bureau chief of Southern California office. He was second in command only to Hoover and the top of the FBI's chain of command. And he, as he retired, he focused his life, his resources, his retirement to trying to get indictments and arrests and put what he would call the dirtiest scumbags on the planet away for a good long time. I got to tell you, Major, Ted Gunderson could have been a movie. He had movie star good looks. He was a tough guy. He's a tough guy. You don't go to the top of bureau chief without knowing your trade. And he was a good cop and a tough cop, federal cop. And here's this a lot of part of his life. He's there right where I'm talking to you today at my home in Ogden, Utah. We were sitting on my balcony overlooking the city, and I'd fried up a hamburger for him. We were sitting there breaking some bread, eating a little bit, and he had been diagnosed with cancer, and he knew he was not feeling well. His energy wasn't what it was 15 years ago. And I remember him putting his head in his hands and just letting go and sobbing, crying that he felt like he had been a wasted failure because he had not had one indictment, let alone one arrest. The powers that be were so powerfully entrenched, it was hard. And we thought, there was a big breakthrough with the Omaha, Nebraska, Franklin cover-up of heaven's sakes, the Roman Catholic Church's boys' town there, Father Flanagan's orphanage boys' town, involved in this in a huge way. It's all there in the pages of the book, the Franklin cover-up. And yet, nothing, even in the Midwest, Nebraska, Omaha, this is the heartland of America. It was so politically charged, it was covered up. Because you see, to fully give indictments, to fully bring this thing crashing down, you're talking about the biggest players in both parties nationally and even international players, folks, that both the GOP and the DNC, both are equally guilty. And believe me, what's happening now with the Jeffrey Epstein saga is, I don't think we can talk too much about this, frankly. Major, what's your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. This is so big that you've got so many factions of it. There's a religious aspect of it that is involved in the Catholic Church, but there's also a religious aspect of it that's involved in a cultism, that's involved in multi-level marketing. Then you have factions that are part of government agencies that are using this information to control the most powerful people on earth. Then you have the people that are producing it. You've got the people that are child welfare people that are profiting from it, the traffickers. And you've got a part of the internet that is you're in constant battle with. It is so pervasive that it's protected. It has to be protected by some very, very powerful people who are involved in this. And some of the latest ones, obviously, Chelsea Clinton just yesterday comes out with a denial that she knew Epstein's right-hand pimp, this socialite, European socialite. And they're saying, oh, well, we knew somebody who knew them, and we fell out of good graces with them, so we didn't know anything about despite the fact that Bill Clinton, who has a long history of rape and sex with underage girls, is on Epstein's flight. I think it's interesting that their responses are gearing up towards this guy. Really, this guy, he never really thought that he would be in prison for the rest of his life. And now he's going to talk. And of course, the latest news, whether, whatever happened to him in prison, there's a question there. Was that did somebody attempt to kill him? I wouldn't be surprised if this guy gets killed in prison. But, yeah, it's so pervasive, true. And you're right. I don't think we can talk about it enough.
Well, this is what, again, I wanted to have Attorney Casal. He initially agreed that he would come on at least for a cameo, 10 or 15-minute bite. But again, he decided he better not while the case is still pursuing. Because, I credit Paul Casal with a lot of this. His tireless, since 2007, 2000, and all of the filings he had on behalf of these victims that are Utah natives. This is why this is a key thing. But now we see ABC News and all the other mainstream media now they can't ignore this anymore. So now the question becomes, in my mind, how are they going to say it and exactly how are they going to couch it? Here's this, again, this was just a few days ago, the story by James Hill, Chris Francescani. Judge signs protective order over materials the feds to turn over to jail financier Jeffrey Epstein. Quote now, federal prosecutors in New York overseeing the case against multimillionaire Jeffrey Epstein are preparing to hand over highly sensitive investigative material to the financier's defense attorneys after a federal judge on Friday granted the government's request to place a protective order on the documents. So here, the question becomes, why a protective order, basically sequestering this, keeping this secret? Prosecutors sought the order because they said in court filings, if you can believe this, they intend to produce documents and materials that could, quote, affect the privacy and confidentiality of individuals, which in turn would impede or prematurely disclose the government's ongoing investigation of currently uncharged individuals. Okay. Who are these uncharged individuals? How far up or how far down the rabbit hole does this go to? And here's a ABC News quote. When Epstein secured a non-prosecution agreement with federal prosecutors in southern Florida in 2008 over a previous investigation, the much criticized deal, of course it was criticized because, you see, it was absolutely a cover-up. The agreement immunized and protected any and all potential co-conspirators, known or unknown, but also included the names of 4 women who had been suspected by authorities of having facilitated or participated in alleged crimes against children in the sex trafficking department. The deal, which is currently under review by the Justice Department's Office of Professional Responsibility, allowed Epstein to plead guilty to 2 state counts and avoid federal charges for an allegedly broad pattern of crimes against children. Throughout the negotiations for nearly a year after the agreement was signed, the victims were kept in the dark. Their attorneys said, which Paul Casal is one, claiming they were strung along as government lawyers promised victims they were still investigating, even long after they had cut the sweetheart deal with Epstein. Now, this is where this is getting pretty juicy, really. One of Epstein's accusers in that investigation, Courtney Wild, identified in court documents simply as Jane Doe number 1, actually sued the Department of Justice in 2008. This is Attorney Casal. This is, again, ABC News, alleging that the non-prosecution agreement reached with Epstein by federal prosecutors in South Florida was completely hatched in total violation of the Crime Victims' Rights Act. And it is. That's what I wanted Attorney Casal to go in depth and detail of of why this is so sick. The Crime Victims' Rights Act, which enumerates the rights afforded to victims in federal criminal cases, including the right, quote, to reasonable, accurate, and timely notice of any public court proceeding or any parole proceeding involving the crime or any of the release or escape of the accused. It didn't happen. So here on ABC News actually posted the lawsuit, and it's filed long ago, 2008. It's been 11 years getting into this, to get to the system. This is what's so wrong about this, and all the hypocrisy to me is amazing, because you have now, if you have in professional sports, whether you're a basketball player, a baseball player, a football player, you even breathe of abuse, of even hitting a spouse, your wife, or talking smack, you're in deep trouble. Let alone if they were ever accused of having sex with children. I mean, yet Epstein has, and all the co-conspirators have all this deal cut and protected. How deep hypocrisy is that? I mean, it's capital HYP. See, it's 6. Hypocrisy at the highest level. But perhaps, let's cross our fingers that justice is being served. Perhaps there'll be more indictments. I hope the ABC News is right, that there are other charges pending and a big, huge thing. And while all the while the media on Capitol Hill is like, let's talk about Mueller. Let's go investigate this collusion with Russia. No, that's not even nearly the story this is, in my opinion. What do you think?
Oh, no, it's not. It's I mean, this is big. This is as big as it gets, and to see these people distancing themselves, they know something is going to go down, because it's gotten to the point where, you know, I had a screenwriting professor illustrate something which was interesting. He got up to the blackboard, and he was making a point saying you should write about even the things that you're afraid to write about. That was his point. And he said, let's say that you're afraid of writing about Mickey Mouse, and he's scribbling across the board, but he's making the scribbles so that there's actually a silhouette of Mickey Mouse. And he says, this is your writing. And they have written all around this. And a lot of the writing that's near the borders of Mickey Mouse is that Me Too movement that was so pervasive that so many people, including some lawmakers that are on the Democrat side in the U.S. were involved, and they ended up going down on the Me Too movement. And actors like Kevin Spacey, maybe he was, I don't know, vindicated, I guess, but not vindicated, but he got away with it. But what was missing in all of that is that this whole movement exists, but nobody, not a single person, is talking about what about the kids that are getting raped? Okay, what about the kids that are getting trafficked and owned and bartered? And which, I'm sorry, I don't want to make light of sexual harassment, but you compare that to a pat on the ass in the office place, I'm sorry. You know, if I'm a judge and I've got my docket that day, I'm going to give a little more importance to that because, you know, kids getting trafficked and raped and killed is a little more important. Where is it in our heads that in society that we're just ignoring this? So, that's the point. All the writing is around it, and all of these movements in Hollywood, and in Hollywood's neck deep in it. And take a look at what happened to Corey Feldman. He is somebody who tried to speak out, and he's totally blackballed right now. He was passed around as a child actor for, you know, all of the producers and all of this. And why wasn't he part of the Me Too movement? I'll tell you why, is because he was a kid. And it's okay to have sex with kids and exploit kids. As long as you can take down your enemies by saying that you were harassed as a woman or even a guy when you're an adult, then that's okay. But really, children don't seem to have any rights here, and that's a serious problem. That's something that's just morally incomprehensible.
Have you read the Franklin Cover-Up by John DeCamp? The book?
No, I haven't, but I have looked into that whole case, which is I haven't read that book, but I've gone through and studied what I had on online once I found out about it, and that was a long time ago. I mean, I think maybe 10 years ago. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand how so many people walk. It was such a huge organization. It was, and it's sickening. I mean, how they could get away with it. And the only people that got hurt were the people that brought it up, that blew the whistle on them. Those are the only people that got hurt in that whole deal.
That's my point. That's my point. These innocent children, teenage children, finally getting some courage and to come up and speak the truth, are charged with felony charges of lying, of perjury, and were prosecuted and put away in jail. And slapped on the hand, their accusers got away with it. I mean, that's the story, and the state, Nebraska State investigators, the council people that were involved in investigating it in a subcommittee, they were murdered over. They were assassinated. This is an ongoing saga, and head and shoulders in charge of a lot of the cover-up and the bribery and the payoffs, according to the book, the Franklin Cover-Up. And John DeCamp was an attorney, and his experiences trying to protect these kids was amazing. And of course, he enlisted Ted Gunderson's help as an investigator to come in to prepare what he thought were indictments that should have been brought down. But again, it goes back to some very high-level people in the GOP at the time. The thing I wanted to bring out is one of the key law enforcement agencies. There's as Gunderson said, there's nothing worse than a dirty cop, and there's nothing worse than a dirty head cop. Okay, the chief of police. That you can't. I mean, because when you're talking about murder of sitting Congress people, state representatives, and then the chief is complicit, and this is again accusations made by DeCamp, not true. This is I'm quoting from the pages of the book. This chief of police was a Utah native named last name of Wadman, Police Chief Wadman. Wadman, there was enough heat that he did resign over this whole, after the book was published, and he moves back here to Utah, and I know right where he lives here in Ogden, Utah, my hometown, and immediately takes a very high position at Weber State University teaching criminal science, of all things, because his family is a construction company of very high renown and money power here in Utah. Now, follow this down a little further. I'm sitting here I sponsored a conference on child sex abuse and child trafficking, and we had victims that had come forward here in Utah that we were looking for representation, like Mr. Paul Casal, wonderful man, as a victim's advocate here in Utah. We had John DeCamp. We flew John in. We had Ted Gunderson here too as well. Just basically comparing notes with ongoing research into why Utah is such a prevalent thing. Now, immediately upon coming back to Utah, Bob Wadman sued John DeCamp in Utah court, it was a federal court, as I believe, for defamation of character, and sued him for a tort claim for many millions of dollars, defamation of character. So DeCamp had to come here. He was defendant, DeCamp, but he was also, of course, an attorney representing himself. I covered that course. I was there in the gallery watching the whole proceeding, and it was amazing that the judge was clearly, refused to be bought off by the power influences that were there in his courtroom. And he basically ruled the truth is a defense, and ruled in favor of John DeCamp, and dismissed the lawsuit as DeCamp was found not guilty because of it was a public trial about the Franklin cover-up and the sex trafficking reality. What was amazing to me, Major, is I asked the local newspapers, I asked the state newspapers, I sent out press releases to cover this story because it tied into the Franklin cover-up story. And even more importantly, there was a documentary done on it called Conspiracy of Silence, a made-for-TV documentary showing the seamy side of human sex trafficking. It was all set to go to be broadcast. I think this was 2000, 2001, 2002. I'm not exactly sure of the dates. The Conspiracy of Silence film was set to be. It was going on public broadcasting, sort of PBS stations, about 2 different stations here in the state of Utah, and all the way across the public broadcasting service was all scheduled. It was in the TV guide. It was all in the listings, The Conspiracy of Silence, on a 2-part documentary series, 2 hours worth, 1 hour on one week and the following week. It was all in the TV guide, and it was not broadcast. It was shut down. It was stopped. That story is a story itself. The news media should find out, why is something that's been scheduled for 6 months into the public broadcasting service, what power has enough power to pull that out of the networking? It blew me away. And then covering the Wadman defamation lawsuit against John DeCamp was another story that was never even breathed on by the media. I think it was when DeCamp was vindicated and was found not liable by the lawsuit. It should have been, again, vindication of the story of these children, these innocent ones, who were serving hard jail time for perjury, for lying under oath about their accusers. It made my heart ache, and no wonder Gunderson was so distraught there at my house that he put his hands in his face and his hands over his eyes and sobbed and just cried crocodile tears. I gave him, some tissue and a napkin. He was heartbroken. I wish Gunderson were still here and alive to see what's happening here. He would be all over this. He'd be just smiling, because this ties into a lot of his research with the international and national group that's called the Finders, that's tied into the CIA, tied into some very, very powerful power brokers. And you know what? He talked about this big-time financier from Manhattan in New York City that had this island and he was telling me these stories about that he'd heard from victims. And I thought, man, that's pretty fanciful, but there was no name. He never named the guy. But he said he'd had many, many reports of this from victims. Well, it's happening, Jeffrey Epstein is 66 years of age. He looks good for 66. You've got to know he does. And what's happened just in February of this year, 2019, finally, U.S. District Court Judge Kenneth Mars ruled in favor of this Miss Wild, Courtney Wild, and other of Epstein's accusers, represented by Attorney Cassell, finding indeed, and this is right from the ABC News press. This is in front page news on ABC News, finding that the federal government failed to confer with the victims in advance of the deal. Judge Mara is now considering the possible remedies for this violation, which could potentially include tearing up the non-prosecution's agreement. Yeah, yippee for that. Now, this is right here. ABC News is letting this. I mean, this is something that was. I am so happy to see this in the mainstream media. And I quote now: Epstein, age 66, who socialized with former President Bill Clinton, Great Britain's Prince Andrew, as well as President Donald Trump. Now, how they know this? Because they have the list of people that were there at Lolita Island. Now, I submit to you, Prince Andrew and Donald Trump and Bill Clinton didn't go there to smoke cigars. Okay? So Epstein was arrested on July 6th, this month, for alleged sex trafficking of minor girls in Florida and New York. Some of the charges date back to the early 2000s. Quote, he was indicted on a child sex trafficking and conspiracy charge in which prosecutors maintained that he, quote, sexually exploited and abused dozens of minor girls. This is the key thing. This is not just one or two. It's many dozens of minor girls at his homes in Manhattan, New York, and Palm Beach, Florida, among other locations, using cash payments to recruit, quote, a vast network of underage victims, some of whom were as young as 14 years old. Epstein has pleaded not guilty, of course, to the latest charges, and his defense attorneys have argued in court that the new indictment is tantamount to, quote, double jeopardy, which, of course, is the constitutional right the accused have, prevents a person from being tried on the same or similar charges twice, based on the same facts, following a valid acquittal or conviction. Now, of course, they would say this is double jeopardy. I was sure that's what they would be defending him. Quote, it is our belief this is basically a redo. Epstein's defense attorney Reed Weingarten told the judge at a bail hearing earlier this month. Quote, this is basically the feds today not happy with what happened in the decision that led to the NPA, non-prosecution agreement, redoing the same conduct that was investigated 10 years ago and calling it now, instead of prostitution, calling it sex trafficking. We think that is the heart of everything, and that will be the centerpiece of our defense. Well, good luck with that. At the same hearing, prosecutors claimed Epstein tried to buy off their potential witnesses and charged that he had demonstrated, quote, a willingness to use intimidation and aggressive tactics in connection with a criminal investigation. Prosecutors alleged that late last year, Epstein wired $100,000 from a trust account to a person who had been named in the 2008 case as a possible co-conspirator of Epstein's, and then 3 days later wired $250,000 to another suspected co-conspirator. So there you have it. That's ABC News. That's how it's done, folks. You want some money to buy you off? Well, fine, we'll wire you the money. Obstruction of justice, anybody? And they wanted to charge Trump with obstruction of justice for trying to put pressure Mueller. See the hypocrisy there, Major?
Oh yeah, it's insane. These folks are, but it's also, I mean, it's one of those deals where if you got enough money, no matter. I mean, Epstein in St. Thomas, where his jet lands, and he carts all these girls onto the helicopter to go to the island. The air traffic controllers knew and saw it. I mean, because his jet was parked right underneath their tower, and it was somewhat of a spectacle to them. It is a point of interest, and so it was always curious. And these guys knew, and of course, St. Thomas is a pretty small island. I mean, if you spend any time there, especially if you live there. It's there's only so many people that work around the airport. It's not that big of an airport, and so word got around that this guy, he is a pedophile, and he is registered as a sex offender, but he's allowed to have all of this. I mean, just can you imagine being a registered sex offender, going to all your neighbors, and of course he doesn't have to do that, but and just flaunting it the way that he did. It's absurd. It's and the point is why didn't anybody and everybody in the government knew in St. Thomas? And this is part of the United States, folks. And yet there it goes. It's all over. I mean, it's because this guy he just doesn't care. In fact, I don't know if you saw, he reported, they just reported that, and we knew about this before, but it's just now in the news, that there's a second island that he is developing, even when he was in prison the first time. And it's a bigger piece of property that he's developing, and he just doesn't even need a building permit. He just starts building, and he doesn't care. He'll pay the fines. And that's the attitude of these people. If you have enough money, you can do anything. I mean, it's a very Clinton-esque attitude.
Yeah, I like what Mr. Rowe gave into the conversation. He's right on. I was going to delve into this too. Who is Epstein, and his membership on the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, all this. He's an upper echelon mover and shaker with authorization to land on military bases. And good point, Mr. Rowe. Yeah, his houses were gifted to him from the Rockefeller family, which of course is we're talking about the biggest power brokers that there are. So this is why this is so amazing. Yeah, they're sealing these investigations because co-conspirators. Well, there's a huge number of them. I promise you, I guarantee you, that he's going to have to start singing like a canary. And when you start messing with the kosher nidra, which is really Jewish mafia, and yes, I said it, I stand behind it. The nation of Israel is complicit in this, more so than the Russian. What's worse? Supposed Russia meddling and posting information from the Pizzagate files of the DNC that Wikipedia posted. What's worse, that or Epstein's connections to Israel and the sex trafficking of these underage kids to the tunes of hundreds of thousands of kids? Which is a worse deal? You see, well. Make no mistake, I don't mind saying it. The President Donald Trump, Mr. Donald Trump, before he was president, was a frequent visitor there. Well, there's smoke, there's fire. Come on, give me a break. He wasn't going there to drink a martini and smoke a cigar with Bill Clinton, I submit. But I'm a conspiracy theorist, so. What's your comments? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, Clinton had to admit. Now, Trump has been was on Lolita 1. We do have records of that, but we don't have records of him going to that island. Clinton, on the other hand, it looks like we may have record of it. even though he denied it. But he did say he knows that we do have the flight manifests of Jeffrey Epstein's plane, and if you take a look at the flight tracker from those flights, there's some really, really weird stuff going on there. Because these flights, they pick up Bill Clinton. Well, they go and they pick up these these girls, because you see all the people that are coming on board, and then Clinton gets picked up, and there's a plus whatever, but there's certain names that are on there, but Clinton's name is on there. And then you go and take a look at the tail number, and they have to file a flight plan, and they're tracked. These flights are tracked, and there are flights that go out of the Azores, and they go out over the Atlantic Ocean, and there's halfway between the the Azores and Africa, and they're just doing circles out there. I mean, they're just spinning in circles, and then they drop down in Morocco and pick up, and then there's a couple of flights where they'll just pick up out of the Azores. And what's interesting there is that there's still a military base there that the U.S. uses and the British use. So there's no doubt in my mind that a lot of some of the cover-up is, how do you get to the Azores without being on a commercial flight or a private flight? But military flights might have been involved in this. And basically he's using this plane as a hotel. And I totally agree with you. All of the evidence that we've uncovered, I mean, and it's tons. I mean, there's a primer that you need to go through just to understand everything that Pizzagate is about. And this is really a big part of it, is how these people are used. And I agree that Epstein was, after a period of time, either wittingly, if he was a Mossad agent himself, I doubt that, but in the end, with his crimes being a lot more than he's ever gone to jail, and it had everything to do with this. Everything to do with probably early in life, and deciding that they could use a guy like him, and he could put people into compromising positions, which he did, and he would need a lot of money to do it, which they gave him. So I truly believe that Epstein and his buddies and everything that's going on with the what's her name, Ghislaine Maxwell, she's part of the whole deal as well, and she is at Chelsea Clinton's wedding. Okay, so really, come on. It's just too much to ignore, and everybody is really jumping out and being proactive right now about it, which tells me that there's a lot more coming.
Right. Here's what I wanted to focus on. Paul Casale actually granted an interview to the local Fox TV news station back on July 11th when this was all breaking. This is his quotes, which he would say on the show tonight if he were here present. I want to have him reiterate it, but it's okay. We have this on the public record. Paul Casale claims that the agreement reached, this is again from the posting on Fox News channel, claims the agreement reached between Labor Secretary Alex Acosta and Jeffrey Epstein was shrouded in secrecy and purposely kept hidden from the victims who he represents. During Acosta's Wednesday press conference about his time as a Florida prosecutor handling Epstein's 2008 prostitution case, he came under fire, Acosta, for an allegedly secret breakfast meeting he had with opposing counsel at his hotel. Quote, what happened at that secret one-on-one private breakfast meeting was that Secretary Acosta and one of Epstein's highest-powered attorneys agreed to keep the non-prosecution agreement secret from the victims, Cassell said Thursday on the Daily Briefing show. Acosta, claimed his clients were never, or Cassell, claimed his clients were never informed that Epstein still granted him immunity from federal charges, and said Acosta was complicit in trying to hide the agreement during the chaotic aftermath. Why? Why is he hiding? See, again, Acosta did make the statement that he was told to do so by people way above his pay grade, that he was intelligence, that Epstein was basically worked for the CIA/Mossad. In the show, 2 weeks ago, we showed this completely, the connection between really the Mossad and the wealthy clients that are tied into this of Epstein. There's absolutely no doubt they're Mossad structures. And again, I asked Cassell to comment on the fact that the evidence shows there's every place, every inch of Lolita Island, from the so-called temple, whatever edifice is there, whatever it's used for, every bit of it is wired for not only recording of sound but video from multiple different angles. There are people that have come forward that worked in the audiovisual field that were paid large sums of money to create this, to basically tape individuals in compromising positions for a blackmail. This is how Mossad operates. You come here, you have this devastating career-ending blackmail to you. It's like, again, I go back to the Hollywood movie depiction of Tom Cruise's movie, The Firm, right, where he is kept in line as a new attorney for the mob's law firm because he's being blackmailed. Well, that's how it works. It's really not fiction, and this is one of it's a blackmailing operation primarily. Now, Cassell would not comment. He says, well, that could be, but it doesn't affect his clients as far as he's concerned, right? So he just wants justice for them. Now, here's the quotes from Cassell in the article, and I quote, for the next 8 months, this is after the agreement was arranged, the sweetheart plea deal. For the next 8 months, the victims were never told that there was an immunity agreement in existence that was going to prevent federal prosecution of Epstein for the crimes he committed against them, Cassell said. Now, and what world are you in that you don't disclose that for 8 months to the victims themselves? Not to mention their attorneys, their representation. Cassell says, quote, I won't speak to Acosta's motives, but I will speak to the facts. And the facts are that after that private one-on-one meeting, it is clear for the next 8 months, the victims were never told that there was already a signed agreement between Epstein and Acosta preventing federal prosecution. And that's, of course, documented by the whole pattern of what happened over the next 8 months. A federal judge has now found that the U.S. Attorney's Office, led by Mr. Acosta, concealed the agreement and misled the victims about what was going on. And it all seems to relate back to this one private one-on-one meeting. Cassell said it's taken over a decade now to shine the spotlight on the case and accused Acosta's successors at the U.S. Attorney's Office of covering up stonewalling and covering up and stonewalling it at all costs. That's the big story. It really, truly is. Now, here's what here's the challenge he gave to Secretary Acosta. Quote, "It's taken us 11 years, Secretary Acosta, while he was the U.S. Attorney, and then his successors have thrown up roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. But we're pleased that the judge has finally reached and ruled on the merits of the issue, found indeed the victims' rights are violated, and is now looking at remedying it," he said. We're trying to get justice for Florida victims in Florida. We're trying to get the immunity provisions that block Epstein's prosecution in Florida rescinded. And then the victims will have the right to confer with prosecutors there, explain what happened to them. And I want to say this to Secretary Acosta. One of the big problems with what we have, with what happened yesterday, is he spoke to the Washington Press Corps about his reasons for doing all of this. But he has never come to Florida to talk to the victims. Isn't that strange? Secretary Acosta, please come to Florida and talk to the victims. I know they will have lots of questions that they would like to have answered. That's kind of a slapping the face with the proverbial gauntlet. Mr. Acosta, come to Florida and meet these victims and talk to them and look them in the face. Do you think he'll ever do that?
Well, he doesn't have to now. He resigned, So
Yep.
it's I mean that's a good move. I was refreshed that he got the hell out because man, you can't. I don't know. I mean, if I was president, I would urge that too. I'd say, man, I don't want anything to do with that, and it's just dirty. A lot of this stuff. These are the worst of the worst people. So the people who are in control are the most evil, and these are their lawyers. These are the people that are even the prosecutors are involved in this, and it requires bad intentions. It requires a selfishness. It requires some sort of self-empowerment that really isn't for the good of anyone but yourself and your group. And if your group and you signed on, there you have it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the first hour. Come on back the second hour. We'll talk and give you some stories of some of the victims themselves. We'll get you able to, if you want to make a difference in one way or another, we'll show you how to do so. This is the story behind the story. This is Dr. H. Ruot. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stay tuned. Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen, the doctor is in. I'm in this week. Last week, I got to tell you where I was. I was actually in a fundraising gala for a group of people that are bringing help and hope to victims of sex trafficking. The place is, you can go online and check it out. It's called Sarah's Home. It's a fully accredited school to see the kids when they're brought into this and are trafficked. They really have no, shall we say, support base. They're made to feel like nobody will care. They're made to feel like it's all that they can do is to learn to be the best trick turner that they can be and to basically make their pimp happy no matter what. And so they have to learn a trade and a skill, and learn something that'll make them a viable part of the community, whichever they live, and make them feel good about themselves. Again, it's a faith-based operation called Sarah's Home. But, here's the reality. There are 8 beds there. They have no government funding because, you see, they don't want to be told what they can and cannot do as far as teaching faith, to get people's full restoration happening, to get them to feel good about themselves as a human being. you need to have some faith counseling going in. You really do, because government agendas, government psychiatrists and psychologists, they come far short, in my opinion, in doing the work that needs to be done. So we're able to meet and talk with at this gala some of the success stories. There's only 8 beds there at Sarah's home, but there are success stories, and every person is important. Every person is now being a viable member of society. So we raised quite a bit of money for the Sarah's home. We had also in the news the Utah-based Operation Underground Railroad, or OUR, is something that's getting more and more traction in the media. The Attorney General for Utah, Mr. Reyes, has been very supportive finally of doing some sting operations here in Utah, making arrests, and more importantly, networking with other FBI law enforcement agents, and not only in missing children cases, but also the resurrecting and revitalizing what Ted Gunderson was deeply involved with, the occult crimes division of the FBI. Because you see, this is really at its core a satanic ritual going on. These survivors tell these stories of these very strange, shall we say, rituals, the best way to describe it, and religious overtones that are definitely designed to empower demonic entities. This is incubus, succubus. These are sex demons that the elite seem to want to be involved in. Now, this gala last week was last Friday. I wish I could have had the microphone turned on as we listened to the saga of these young children who were, and every case that I've seen with Sarah's home, also with the vast majority of other cases, it's family members that are multi-generational in scope that bring these kids in, thinking that's Grandpa did it to me, great Grandpa did it to Grandma, etc. All the way down. It starts in the family. These are family-bred family lines that we seem to, again, it goes back to a dark religion, a satanic ritual. So what better way to make inroads than with a Christ-centered, faith-based opposition to that? So this is what we're talking about here. So I want you to check out, listeners that need more information, look at Operation Underground Railroad. Just Google up Operation Underground Railroad. There's been a really good series of documentary films done that are very professionally recorded and done. Spread the word, share it. And, look at, just Google up Sarah's home. It's in Colorado. We need about 100 more Sarah's homes. We really do. There's not a day goes by that the FBI doesn't call trying to get a victim placed into Sarah's home, but there's not enough beds. There's not enough facility or staff. There's just not nearly enough of this going on. All right, so Major, let's delve into how we can get involved to make a difference. And like Sarah's home says, if you just help even one child break the bonds of this, it's a very, very important part of the equation. There's in the Operation Underground Railroad link to the stories, they have a breaking in the news section there. They keep updated. And top on the list is, here's what to know about the sex trafficking case against Jeffrey Epstein. That's the links to Utah are not so much recorded on this, but they should be. But you were just there in San Francisco, Major. Mr. Rowe is there, and we have other listeners that are regular tuners in. I don't know how much this made the newspapers there in San Francisco, but the California Department of Social Services just gave San Francisco a $9.3 million grant to help provide services to victims of human trafficking in the city of San Francisco. So they're in the process of building a drop-in center for youth to be able to access all necessary services at the same location. Now, $9.3 million, man, that's just nothing. I know there's a lot of sex trafficking going on in the Bay Area, San Francisco. What's your reaction to that, Kevin?
They've spent more money on legal funds to defend illegal aliens as a sanctuary city to get them the best attorneys on the peninsula than $9 odd million. It's in the tens of millions of dollars now. It's an insult. And the thing with San Francisco, I wouldn't trust it anyway. One of the most popular things when you walk around and talk to people, I've lived there for quite a while now. It is, what do you do for a living? Oh, I work for a nonprofit. And it's like, well, no, I didn't ask what the fact that your company, like what your tax status is. What do you do? And people are just kind of shocked by that. It's like, but that's good enough. I work for a nonprofit. And that attitude is what sucks up most of in San Francisco for doing really any good. You've got people that are making $200,000-300,000 a year doing, good, but really it's one of these deals like, Bono's charity or something like that, or the Clinton Foundation, where none of this money actually gets to where it needs to go. Now, I'm not gonna bang on anyone for putting in money to help sexually abuse kids. That's not what I'm trying to say here. I'm just saying, with their tax base, it's an insult. And the other thing too is get them off the peninsula, get them out in an area where people won't. Because, frankly, I don't know, the way things are rigged up right now over there, because you're going to have a bunch of transsexual people working there and all of these neutral gender bathrooms. And, you might have a situation where that's a real good charity for somebody to work for, considering what their proclivities might be. And, you might open yourself up. The way that city is run and the mentality of the people there, you might actually be funding further abuse. I know that's pretty, there's a lot of conjecture there, but that is the last place I would want to put a sexually abused child, is in San Francisco. So, because it's just, they're not ready to deal with that issue. They need to. It's a wonderland over there, as far as whatever popular beliefs. And believe me, it has not set in over there that abusing children is not. People who abuse children should be punished. In fact, actually, there's a growing trend right now, and I consider this sexual abuse of people where it's just popular, and actors are. Charlize Theron has come out and decided that her boy is now a girl, or is sexually neutral, 7 years old. That's a form of abuse, as far as I'm concerned, and that's something that's being celebrated in California and Hollywood, and especially in San Francisco. And I keep going back to this article that the Chronicle just heralded this family, if you could call it that, which is surprising, a man and a woman who were married in San Francisco and had a boy, and they admit that they were getting high and decided that it would be fun to dress their son up in girls' clothes, and the kid got a lot of attention as a child because he come out to their parties. You know, they were hosting all these parties, and he'd come out dressed up as a girl. And when it came time to go to school, then he'd, they said, well, it's up to you how you want to dress. And they're leaving that decision up to the kid. And it's kind of hint, hint, you can do whatever you want. But the kid always got more attention dressed up as a girl. And so to me, that's really screwed up. You shouldn't be doing that. You've got people that think that that's cool and popular and that's a trend going on. That's the last place on earth you should be really dealing with children who have been sexually assaulted.
Exactly. That's why I thought I said the information 9.3 million is an insult. You're absolutely right. It's going to be used probably to pay the people that are doing it. Now, here's the other part of the story behind the story. Major League Baseball's All-Star game was held in Cleveland. So this is something that you don't see on ESPN. You don't see it on any of the talking head sports shows. I think it's a crying shame. This was reported in the Cleveland Metro newspaper and the local Cleveland stations, and then this kind of gone away. This is, and let me just quote from the Cleveland Metro newspaper. Cleveland, dozens of men have been arrested as part of 2 major sex trafficking / exploitation stings. The Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office and Ohio Attorney General David Yost announced Thursday afternoon. While Cleveland was celebrating the 2019 Major League Baseball All-Star Week, undercover agents from 16 agencies teamed up to conduct a 4-day online child exploitation bust dubbed Operation Triple Play. Operation Triple Play focused on a far more serious crime, soliciting sex with minors. They had basically Operation Home Run, just soliciting prostitution, right? But Operation Triple Play focused on a far more serious crime, soliciting sex with minors. Now there were 21 arrests made for Operation Home Run, but there were 28 arrests made for Operation Triple Play. There was a much more volume trafficking on the sex with minors enticement, which tells you one thing: this is more popular, more palatable with these sickos. Law enforcement officials said Thursday that 28 people were arrested during this 4-day sting. They set up a base inside a vacant village owner home in Newburgh Heights in Cleveland and pretended to be underage children online. Once they met men they say were willing to have sex with their underage persons, they invited the men to that home. When the men showed up, rather than meeting with a child they actually planned to have sex with, they met with a team of law enforcement agents ready with handcuffs. There's a video showing the arrest. And it gives the names and ages of these individuals. They're amazing because they're all locals. They're all Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Medina, Ohio, Lakewood, Ohio, age 20, 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24. The oldest is a 67-year-old from Parma, Ohio. These are all Ohioans, folks. Wow. Because of Major League Baseball's, they were looking to. I think they were trying to sting visitors that came in, but all the 28 were arrested were local Ohioans. Wow, isn't that kind of an amazing statistic? From only one old man, 67 years old. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's intriguing. And there's a bunch of groups and police officers, and there was a TV show, in fact, that what was the guy's name? He got into some trouble himself. I think he's in prison, not for. Oh, well, it'll come back to me. Phil talks about him all the time. But I was thinking, wouldn't it be? I mean, there's going to be enough of these that go on, and I think they're good as long as they're police led, as long as it's not just these groups. They can bring in all the expertise, but they need to make sure that they're working with the cops on this one. But I agree. I think they should be done. But there's going to be one of these, Dr. True, one day where they're waiting on this guy to show up, and the cops are in the garage or whatnot, ready to come out, and the police chief is going to show up as one of those guys. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. I swear. And you know what? Too bad. I'm sorry. But that's really what we're looking for when we at the Goldwater, if you go to the pedogate section, it's nothing just, I mean, that's all we cover is all of that. And we couldn't even use, I mean, we renamed it. It was called Pizzagate, but people seem to not understand that Pizzagate is much larger, but it's part of all of this. So if you look at just the sheer volume of these crimes, it's going to happen eventually. And what the hope is that you get somebody that is really important, and once that domino falls, all the others are going to go. And I don't know, is Epstein going there? Now, I don't know if you noticed in the chat, this is an interesting thing, if you don't mind me bringing it up. I thought it was fascinating. Dom brought up the possibility, hey, if you're a billionaire, and there's some questions about this whole thing with Epstein in prison, about whether he tried to hang himself or was assaulted by his cellmate. But it was a really interesting thought. It said, well, if you're a billionaire, couldn't you have a doppelganger? Couldn't you have, because, very powerful people have had this happen before. Couldn't you in some way put somebody, do they really check the prints? I know people do this for taking tests and things like that, but man, I don't know. And I guess the response is you get some dental records or DNA, even if Epstein has so much power to protect against that. You could bribe people in the prison to get DNA or to get dental records, because eventually he's going to have to go to the dentist in there. But interesting thought. Very interesting thought, Dom. I don't know. What do you think, Drew?
I was just going to say that I was going to bring that up as another angle to this. What's really going on in prison? Because again, looking who they are, who the kosher Nidra is. This is the biggest of the big, and you're not going to. Again, I wanted to focus on what's happening in Major League Baseball as this triple play, because it's a problem when Joe Blow sees things online and sees, oh my goodness, here's a chance to go and do the real thing, and then just fantasize and gets hooked up. But the difference with this sting and the big players on Pizzagate is because they have a safe network. They deemed it to be safe. In other words, discretion. They could get on whether it's Trump's private airplane or private jet, fly in. Because I like you said, I am not a Donald Trump fan for this one reason. Before he decided to run for the presidency as a candidate, there was investigative journalists that uncovered that he was a big time, constant friend and donor of Jeffrey Epstein, and they wanted to find information about Donald Trump has numerous private jets. He could have flown in, and they're trying to find out the manifest to fly in, how many times he actually went to Lolita Island. And they were hot on the trail of this when suddenly all these records were made to disappear. I'm reminded of that section in the movie A Few Good Men where Colonel The colonel says to him, well, you can't handle the truth, but you can make those flight logs disappear and alter them. You can absolutely, and this is a true story that went on in the prosecution of this Marine Corps colonel at Guantanamo. It's an easy thing to make flight manifests disappear if you have the connections in the intelligence network, especially the intelligence networks. So I'm saying, Donald Trump is one of the big ones that has. I mean, he's just as guilty as Bill Clinton and Hillary. I'm sorry, I know this. He wouldn't cover up all of the flight manifests of his private jets in that area if there wasn't some smoke happening. I'm sorry. So yeah, here's these 28 individuals arrested. It's not really a big story except for the local Ohio newspapers, and it surely isn't talked about on ESPN's Bases Loaded, right? You've got to understand that it's nobody's going to be taking a solicitation ad over the phone if you're a big player like the chief of police, for instance. They're going to have protected networks, which is what Pizzagate's all about, really. See, so yeah, that's my 2 cents on the subject. With that, it needs to be exposed at the highest level. Going back to again the Franklin cover-up, the GOP is just as dirty as rotten, maybe more so than the DNC. That's the reality as I see it.
And then going into, in Europe, talk about cover-ups in Sweden. You had a massive cover-up. You had a major cover-up in Belgium, and one of the guys who was holding these women hostage, and one of them was impregnated his daughter and kept her locked down in a basement for something like 10 years. And just these really, really sick predators seem to have ties with at least in Belgium. If you look at that case, I'll need to bring that back into memory here. It's been a couple of years since I researched that and freshened up on it, but there were some very, very high-profile people in government that were caught up in this and had ties to this sicko. And these are like, this is just ties to the government in Europe. I wouldn't be surprised if you've got ties to these people that are almost being celebrated. The sickest of the sick. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't have some of these kidnappers and child rapists and possibly prolific serial killers who've yet to be caught. And there's certainly there are 2 still active in Long Island, and we don't know exactly. And it looked to us like, whoa, you've got competing serial killers, and it's really, you were asking. I know a lot of this sounds crazy, but it's not crazy when you start researching it, and all of these people are tied together, and it's not by coincidence. They have multiple lines going to each other, and they're in communication with each other. And why are you talking to these people? Why would you be talking to these people? Why would you be going to their house and celebrating their, quote, artwork, unquote? I still don't think that we're done with Podesta and his brother. I still don't think that we're done with the Clintons and the celebration of this. You mentioned a lot of this is family related. I'm still curious, and it's a legitimate question, why even back starting in 2006, Chelsea Clinton is wearing an upside down cross. What is the deal there? And I know there was something recently with her getting into some Twitter conversation, and the Church of Satan came in, and she said, "Happy New Year." It's been way too long, guys. Happy New Year. You read through that, and I don't take much stock in that, but it's a symbolism that these people are throwing out, the signs that they're throwing out, who they're deciding to spend time with. And what I see is Chelsea Clinton wearing an upside-down cross, and I see Chelsea Clinton hanging out with Ghislaine Maxwell, and Ghislaine Maxwell attending her wedding. And to say, well, we don't know the Epsteins, and we just have no idea, is untrue. Now, I know people who are powerful and wealthy know tons and tons of people, but when these people are in prominent wedding photos with you, there's something when they're going to your wedding and they're obviously one of the VIP guests, and to turn around and say, well, we don't know them, I'm sorry, that's just a lie. And I don't understand how she could be so stupid to think that this was back in 2006 when she's wearing this upside down cross, and she wore it years later, and people called her out on it, and the response back was, oh, it's a Greek cross. But if you look at it, and I've got 3 different photos in front of me. Wait a minute. No, it clearly looks like an upside down cross, even if the mounting or whatever is going through it. It is clearly an upside down cross. Why would you wear that? Even if it's a Greek cross, it looks like it's upside down. Why would you wear that? So there's all different things. And that's obviously the smallest of the smallest thing. What we're concerned, essentially the most powerful people in the world, having a hand in this or being part of it because they have to. It's almost like it's the same type of tactics that the Church of Scientology use, where you're getting cleansed and you're going through this process, and part of going through the process is that you have to dump out everything that you've ever done bad in life, and it's all recorded, and it's used as blackmail against you in case you disavow the Church of Scientology. That's exactly what happened to Tom Cruise, and of course all of the other offshoots of Scientology, these cults, which are sex cults and people that are getting branded, and there's charges of human trafficking going on right now. Celebrities are involved in this. So to say that this isn't happening, to say it's not a conspiracy, it's de facto. It's unquestionably a conspiracy, but one that is, and we always hate that word because you're a conspiracist. It's by definition a conspiracy, true? And I can't wait for these files to, these groups on 8chan to start firing up again, and we're seeing a lot more activity right now. But I guarantee you in 2020, when everything gets fired up and you've got a lot of these Democrats that are running and Republicans, that this is going to be a big deal. If anyone had anything to do with these people, believe me, all of the folks at 8chan and on the image board networks and the people that are doing all of this research, independent journalists, they're going to find out. And they're going to scrutinize each other's data in the best. In fact, the amount of research and journalism that goes on, and before even it becomes journalism, if you want to call it citizen journalism, but just the amount of research and the hostile environment in which that research is done holds true to more journalistic ethics than any mainstream media network I have ever seen, or for that matter, any fact-checking organization that anyone is trusting right now. So I'm looking forward to seeing that happen. You were talking about what people can do. That's one thing, is to go in and really be critical of everything and to research things yourself, because you'll be amazed. 10,000 people might look at it, but you might be the one that finds something out that all of these people who have been researching it for years never thought of, or couldn't draw the lines to, or didn't have the contacts to get the hard evidence for. And that's all it's based on, is pure evidence. So for people to say Pizzagate is just a hoax, wow, they know nothing about it.
Oh, indeed. And I got to say this too, as far as this sting operation going on. Think about it. It's only a 4-day operation sent to go and to coincide with the All-Star game in Cleveland. Now, wait a minute. Think about it. You've got only local Ohioans netted in the sting, and it's 4 days, 28 people arrested. Do the math. Okay, that's 7.5 people a day that are brought up in the sting. Why not have this ongoing? Why just have it be part of a Major League Baseball triple play type of thing? It should be going on, randomly across the country all the time. I submit. There's not enough people to prosecute. 28 is a drop in the bucket. See, one of the things that came out in the Sarah's home investigations is the role that truck stops across the country play in trafficking these kids. So much of these sex slaves work the truck stops in a big way, and of course there's complicity in the trucking industry, unfortunately, for new flesh, new blood to kind of go back. When a prostitute or a sex trafficker gets to a certain age, they're not as valuable anymore. They need to bring in fresh blood, so to speak, fresh meat. And so this is there are truckers that facilitate these new victims. Sad situation, but it's really true. More stings need to happen, I submit, than just 4 days and it's not even talked about in the national media that much. You see.
Yeah, and if somebody really had the gall to do it B&D. They could do it in Maryland. Start in Maryland. That's what I would go. Maryland. Well, really, if somebody wants to take a look at it, man, true. I mean, one thing that I didn't mention that this is the one that really hurts me, because there's an evidence, and I can't understand why nobody looked into it. Is CPS in Maryland, and they're tied to the people who were bringing kids out of Haiti through the Dominican Republic and up to Maryland, and what happened to them, and there's no records. Nobody's looked into that. There hasn't. I mean, to me, that's kind of like a operation, and I think that's the serious stuff right there. Is when you have child protective services. First of all, legally, are they able to take care of children that don't have a name and their origin? I mean, don't they to investigate parents? What are they doing with Haitian people that are smuggled into the United States? Why is that? And why do they go through and then the people receive them, worked at CPS, and yet there's no record of them, no record of the children? So, I mean, there's something really, really wrong with a lot of that, and that's the really scary, deep, dark, crazy because the people that are tied into that are the people that are tied into the spirit cooking. They're tied into a lot of the other, Podesta side of things. And that's the kind of stuff that you don't want to ever see, but you don't even want to think about. Maybe that's the reason because it sounds so outrageous. But I wish somebody would debunk it. I wish somebody would come into that section of Pizzagate. That's the one that really disturbs me, is CPS in Maryland. I really wish somebody would come in and debunk it, please. And you take a look. We had somebody, and we haven't verified the video, but we believe it's true. And we talked about it a little bit last week. There was a video of the FBI trying to recruit somebody who's a regular 8chan user, and which makes sense. It really does. And again, this is the blowback from New Zealand. They want the FBI wants somebody who is on 8chan, and they asked them, would you be willing to apply for a job at the FBI and to keep an eye on 8chan as far as threats and things like that. Okay, you know what? That makes sense. I mean, sure. I believe that, and I don't think that the FBI's intention I don't think it's bad that they would do that. I think that that's certainly within the scope of their job. Well, why aren't they doing that? Why aren't they going into all of the Pizzagate files, all of the archives that have been accumulated? I mean, you're talking about tens of thousands of pages, true, and that have been truly debated. I mean, it is, like I said, it's a very hostile environment. If you come out and say and make a statement, there's going to be 1,000 people that are going to go in and look at it and verify it. It's just like how we verified that Clinton was on Epstein's plane, and that you can't trust anyone. And when you've got 10,000 people that are looking at the same thing, the chances go very, very high up, as opposed to, say, Snopes. Okay. Mm-hmm. But, and some of these places may have a political agenda, but I'll tell you what, most of all of this are very, very avid people. And I mean, if you want to, I mean, okay, you could say that there's a political agenda for a lot of people in any area. But one of the best things that I bring up with people is how you can, the real power of people collaborating in this environment, a totally anonymous environment. Because they're law enforcement in there. There's certainly FBI. There's certainly political figures. We know for a fact that Donald Trump Jr. is on 8chan. We found that out in 2016 when Donald Trump retweeted a meme that came out, and the memes are going to be coming out again. I mean, they're already starting to fire up right now, and it's a real threat. We see it over here. We won't go back into what happened here in the Philippines, the amount of pressure that they're putting on us. When I say us, I'm loosely associated and a dear friend of Jim Watkins. Business-wise, we work together in a number of projects, but I don't speak for 8chan itself. I'm just a user, but I can tell you that him as the owner he's just a huge target, and as a result of my relationship, everybody that he knows is a target, and it's just there's a huge amount of pressure to shut us down before 2020. And what I find amazing is that there's so much effort on the press to do this and to go into our lives, but yet they're really not taking a look at what better story is there. I mean, you want to talk about the gold mine, the mother of all stories, is what we're talking about right now. And I just encourage more and more people to go in and take part in it, because the more verification we can get, the more likely somebody who is important, who has the courage to really bring this out, given their position and time in life, that's when something's really going to get done.
Right. Well, while we were discussing this, I need to also say that it's not just sex trafficking that's a problem, and this is more of international. The slavery, human trafficking, is as greater than any time during the slavery trade in the British East Indies Company and that in America. There's it's called Trafficking in Persons Report, or TIP. This is a 522-page document just released in June 2019. You can actually just type in Trafficking in Persons Report. You'll see the actual PDF file come up. This is quite the report that I would suggest listeners get a handle to. First of all, there's a message from the Secretary of State of America, Mr. Pompeo. Here's what he reads, and I want to share this. Dear reader, human trafficking is one of the most heinous crimes on earth. Right now, traffickers are robbing a staggering 24.9 million people of their freedom and basic human dignity. That's roughly 3 times the population of New York City. We must band together and build momentum to defeat human trafficking. We must hold the perpetrators of this heinous crime accountable. We must achieve justice for survivors as they rebuild their lives. We must reinvigorate our shared commitment to extinguish human trafficking wherever it exists. There is no time to waste. Now, pretty bold statement there for sure. You go down into there's actually a message from the ambassador at large, Mr. Reed. What gets me with this is he doesn't take a rocket scientist to start connecting the dots, Major, to see that you want to know who's the main profiteers in all this, what tribe in the world is doing it. It doesn't take much to look at who has always been behind the slave trafficking, profiteering worldwide since at least the 16th century. Look at the powers and players that be. There's a book written actually in the 1860s. It was of a free man, a well-educated black man in New York who was kidnapped, brought into, and forced into slavery down south for 14 years a slave. He documents his eventual release, but all the way through he documents who was responsible for all this, who's dealing in this perverse, heinous crime, Mr. Pompeo. Are you really ready to take this kosher Nidre group on, which points to our best ally in the Middle East? I'll leave it go at that. They've always been involved with that group of people. The slave auctions were always closed during the Sabbath Saturday and every Jewish holiday because that's who ran them. Now, why is it anti-Semitic to point out that's the truth of the matter? That whether it's sexual slavery or human trafficking and forced labor across this planet or this plane or whatever we live on, you see what I'm getting at, Major? This 522-page report is like dressing people up and having no place to go because they're never going to get to the heart of the matter until they expose who's the primary mover and shaker in this whole industry. Am I being too harsh in declaring that?
Not at all. I think it's fascinating, and anyone that is, and I don't necessarily disagree with you on this. I think that, you know, it's a worldwide. There are a lot of players involved, and I tell you that our evidence in Pizzagate, which is certainly, you know, more recent, certainly points to Israel. It certainly points to funding from Israel, and it points to their intelligence community being neck deep in it and orchestrating a lot of this, simply because it's the most valuable commodity on earth when you get it to that level. There's so many levels to this, and there are people that are complicit that it's incredibly disgusting. I think the media is complicit in it. If you take a look at CNN, okay, CNN has been, they've been doing so many things, in so many wrong ways lately. But I can tell you something they did on this topic, human trafficking. They put together a crack crew of people and shipped them over here to the Philippines to prove that, you know, this is a major hub of human trafficking, and it was done because of their political differences with Duterte and the fact that CNN and the powers that be want to influence the government of this island nation. And that's a fact. I mean, that's a fact. If you take a look at CNN Philippines, it's just a fact. Okay, so here's what happened. They came over and they did this big, and I mean, this was a big deal. This was supposed to last, I don't know, multiple episodes. It was supposed to be this massive expose, and all these guys were over here doing it. And they got through half a trailer and half an episode, and it disappeared. And I'll tell you why. Because I guarantee you that these guys got involved with something they shouldn't have been involved with over here. And they were politely asked to leave, okay? And I said, in a sense, I'm saying that the closest thing that the Philippines has to human trafficking is the program that they have for domestic, a lot of people being shipped domestically, and maybe a little lack of oversight on the people that are hiring them and the people that the agencies that are sending them out, especially to the Middle East. And thankfully, I think everybody here agrees on that, that Filipinos should not be exploited in that way. So there's a level, and I'm wondering if that number of people, which is millions, and it's the Middle East, and Canada is huge as well. But there's, of course, a lot of Middle Eastern and wealthy Chinese in Canada who are using Filipinos as maids. And if there's systematic abuse, where do you draw the line? Are those people counted as being trafficked? And it's a gray area, and I can tell you it's something that I think it really, to us, here, it's not a political issue. I think everybody here agrees that it's disgusting for someone who is wanting to do good for their family to go over to Saudi and go through that type of abuse. I guarantee you, in her mind, that turned into slavery. And certainly the government here doesn't want anything to do with that. And for CNN to come over here and to say that these people are arriving on boats and I mean, they were making all sorts of crazy claims, but there's a reason that they shut it down. and because they wanted their narrative just didn't fit. And they finally came over here and realized, hey, maybe we shouldn't be saying something that's just outright untrue. Maybe we should probably discuss how to regulate the entire program of overseas workers who are Filipino nationals that are working overseas. So there's so many levels to this, True. But yeah, certainly governments have a huge responsibility in it. But governments such as Israel, I think, bear or are really not taking. I mean, I think that they're actually funding it. In my opinion, I think that they're funding it for their own reasons, for their own political reasons. So on a government level, that's my opinion on it, just with the experience of those two countries.
Well, yes, and there was another case, an international drug bust in Colombia, where they went in looking for drugs, but actually stumbled onto a huge a ring of international sex trafficking girls, and there were 14 Israeli nationals arrested that were controlling that. That's in Colombia. Again, you look at who controls the drug trade. There's a reason why it's the same group of people that are tied into this. Yeah, and indeed, like you said earlier, and we're up out of time, but in this TIP, this trafficking person report on page 4, this report makes this statement exactly that the vast majority of victims in the United States, and this is the quote, in the United States, traffickers prey largely upon children in the foster care system. Recent reports have consistently indicated that the vast majority of victims of child sex trafficking were at one time in the foster care system. And you nailed it. The Child and Family Services that do that, makes no mistake, they're complicit in so many areas of this. So yeah, exposure. I got to say, this is quite the nice brochure. It's got a lot of sobering pictures. Again, it's you can just Google up the Trafficking in Persons report.